Hello everyone, welcome to my Resident Evil 6, no hope difficulty, no life cube lost walkthrough, and this is chapter 2 of Chris's campaign. And in the beginning, we are in this combat encounter, and how I choose to handle this initial combat encounter is I hug the right hand side and I clear out a bunch of enemies because they're generally focused on your AI partner. And then I'm going to use a flash grenade to stun these enemies that appear when the truck smashes into that APC. And I'm going to kill them using the neckbreaker by getting behind them. And now I'm just going to clear out the rest of the stragglers. This guy right here, I end up turning him into the shield mutation variant of the Juavo. And the shield mutation, you need to get the shield on their right arm so that you'll disarm them of their weapons. Every other Juavo mutation that involves the arm, they will always drop their weapon. I mean, that being said though, I wish there was a whole mechanic in this game where you had the ability to disarm enemies of their weapons, because Resident Evil 4 and 5 had this whole mechanic of disarming enemies of their weapons. However, in Resident Evil 5, when it came to the gun enemies, you could not disarm them of their weapons. You could not shoot the gun, you could not shoot their arms in order to disarm them of their weapons. It seems a little odd that they would do that, but it's not a problem in that game because at least the gun enemies in Resident Evil 5 are properly balanced. There isn't a single encounter, aside from that one rotating platform section in Chapter 5-3, where the gun guys are actually annoying and they're poorly programmed, because you're generally put into a very powerful power position. You can isolate the enemies easily. The feedback on your weapons is really helpful when it comes to dealing with these enemies. Your AI partner is constantly supporting you, and the gun guys in Resident Evil 5 are actually properly balanced. They don't have the ability to fire so freely like what the Juavos can do. They don't hit you through the geometry so much. On Resident Evil 5, when the gun guys fire their weapons, they always do about 2 bursts with their assault rifle, and then they have to actually reload. And before that point, they even give you a warning to indicate that they're about to attack. They always give a warning. You can see the laser sight for a couple of seconds, and then they'll actually fire. It's proper balancing. That is a Resident Evil enemy. That is how you properly balance out an enemy when you yourself don't exactly have the fluidity of movement necessary to allow you to dodge these enemies, because in Resident Evil 5 you have a tank control based system. If the same mentalities that applied to the gunners in Resident Evil 5 also applied to the Juavo in Resident Evil 6, I think this game would be so much more balanced. And another reason why the encounters with the gunners in Resident Evil 5 don't feel so bad is because they don't feel like they drag on for such a long time. Yet in Resident Evil 6, in Chris's campaign, there are a lot of situations where the encounters just drag on more than necessary because there's just so many enemies, and you're forced to be incredibly passive because the Juavo just have all these really unfair advantages when it comes to killing you, and it's just really unfair, and it just adds nothing to the game aside from boredom. And Chapter 2 of Chris's campaign represents this point where the pacing of the encounters takes a turn for the worst. And then it completely flip-flops in Chapter 3, which is honestly the most broken chapter in Resident Evil 6 by far. Just in general, like, there's no other chapter in any of the other campaigns that can compare to Chapter 3 of Chris's campaign. Chapter 3 of Chris's campaign feels so unfinished, and it's not that the encounters just drag on for such a long time, it's more so that the encounters just feel very broken and not properly thought through, and it just makes you wonder what the developers were thinking when they designed it. But I'm not going to go into any details on Chapter 3 right now, because you have to see it for yourself and understand the kind of problems I came across when I was doing Chapter 3. I mean, on my recording run, I didn't have so much trouble with Chapter 3, but for my dry run, before I actually started the recording, I had to restart Chapter 3 so many times because of how broken a lot of the situations were. I was getting screwed by the chopper, I was getting screwed by Iluzija. It was just such an annoying learning process. I just went through hell just trying to figure out those sections, and I was able to find some decent strategies that would definitely help out for those encounters in Chapter 3. I wish I saved more footage from my dry run of the kind of stuff I was doing just to survive those encounters because of how poorly programmed they were. I mean, I saved stuff for the chopper boss fight, and it's at least 45 minutes of me just getting screwed by bad hitboxes left and right with that stupid boss fight. And I was sadly not able to save any footage with Iluzija because a lot of people would probably assume that the kind of issues you encounter with Iluzija can be easily avoided if you're taking the right precautions necessary to avoid the problems, but you shouldn't have to do that. You shouldn't have to adjust your strategies based on faults in the developer's decision making and with how they design these sections. I made this statement before in my Resident Evil 2 Remake walkthrough when I was talking about G3 Birkin. And it's just so dumb that you would have to do that for most of Resident Evil 6 because of just the lack of thought put into a lot of the designs that went into this game. And you encounter most of these problems in Chris's campaign, which is why I just cannot rank this campaign higher than the other campaigns. I mean, a lot of people would say that Ada's campaign is the worst because you're not doing anything, but to be honest, guys, would you really want to go through a terribly designed section just getting overly frustrated that you're just getting betrayed by so many problems in this game, rather than just doing a section of nothing where you're just living in this delusion of grandeur where you're just not seeing the kind of problems that this game has? I mean, I would definitely know what I would take. And based on that reasoning, that's why I took a very passive approach to some of the sections in Chapter 2 of Chris's campaign, where I'm mainly just waiting for events to play out. I'm so glad you don't have to waste time trying to protect your stupid AI partner or the other BSAA soldiers, because they can properly handle themselves. If I was forced to do that and the AI actually had health, I would really dislike those sections, because the AI is just so incompetent in this game. Not only that, but when they're attracting so much attention to themselves, it opens you up to being susceptible to bad designs present in this game. With the kind of problems present with the Juavo, the last thing I want to do is a rage-inducing section that has more to do with making me angry at many of the bad designs put into these enemies and into my partner than anything else. Like, The Evil Within is a game I can cite when it comes to this kind of problem. Joseph on that game is very incompetent at surviving. He does very little damage with his pistol, he can miss, and he's very passive when dealing with the enemies because of the way he's designed. He's forced to run away from the enemies every time they get close to him, and they're way faster than him. He takes so much damage from the enemies, and then finally, his programmed dodge for dodging dynamite can cause him to dodge into the dynamite, and he will just take damage from that. All of those kind of designs force you to protect Joseph constantly, which is why the first phase of that big fight in Chapter 5 is harder than the other phases due to a vast number of enemies prioritizing him, and him being just very incapable at keeping himself alive. Challenge in a section should never be considered as such based on designs like that. That's not challenge, that's just a misunderstanding of good game design and difficulty. I'm sure based on what I've said, you can understand why I'm glad that characters like Finn can't die, and why I'm glad I don't have to involve myself with trying to protect them. Making a good AI system is very hard to do. Although, other people might disagree with me because the whole idea of a good AI system is all relative based on the perspective of an individual. Like this, for instance. I don't understand the whole argument that people present where they say, oh, if you're forced to actually protect your AI partner, then it'll help inform your later playthroughs when you're playing with a co-op partner, but I don't know where they're getting the idea from. I don't know what games they're playing where they say that this is a case, because it just doesn't make any sense. I am still perfectly capable of protecting my human player because they actually know what they're doing, and I have a mic, I can actually communicate with them. But with an AI partner, it's a different story because you don't have the level of communication necessary to help your AI partner out. And I'd be very curious as to understand the origin of this thought process that occurs in these individuals when they believe that being forced to defend your AI partner somehow makes the game better and it somehow informs later playthroughs. Because it's just so mind-boggling to me. And I just think it just lacks a lot of objectivity. They're just making a seemingly basic relationship seem like it has complexity to it when it actually doesn't. Like, if I was to summarize that statement in the realm of science, I would say it's more of a pseudoscience rather than an actual science. And even if it was part of actual science, I highly doubt that they will be able to establish a causal relationship between your ability to defend your AI partner and your ability to help out your human partner. There are way too many confounding variables, and you can't even apply that relationship to public match players, for instance. Public match players are already very incompetent when it comes to playing a game, or actually listening to you, so they're a massive outlier in that case. There's not even a reason to establish such a relationship, because helping someone out is a very basic trait, and it's completely independent of external factors like how you choose to help out your partner. Yet, another reason why this relationship makes no sense, and it's just fundamentally flawed. So when people complain about the AI on this game being very efficient at doing things such as driving or doing QTEs, and then they attribute that to the whole act of cheating, I just can't help but feel very embarrassed at them. Like, in their minds, they feel that the AI should suffer as much as you do, but all I have to say about that is, have you been drinking or smoking too much? Do these people not realize why developers design their AI systems like that? Do these people really want to be screwed so much by an action that is not in their control? Do these people not understand good game design? That's just what it sounds like to me right now. Now, I'm just wondering what kind of games these people have been playing, because it seems like they have a severely limited gaming palette if they're making such a statement. In fact, elaborating on this has actually brought back memories from one of my earlier playthroughs of Resident Evil 6 that ties heavily into this discussion. There was a sequence on Chapter 2 of Jake's campaign that originally had a big problem, but I think Capcom fixed it. You know the sequence where you have that series of doors and you're having to escape Ustanok? Well, on the last door, because it took so long to open, Ustanok would just break through, and then you would open the door, but then your AI partner just wouldn't come with you. They'd be busy shooting at this guy, and I died on that sequence so many times. It's so broken, and I'm so glad that they fixed it, because it never happens to me anymore. I don't know what they did, but they somehow managed to fix that issue. That right there is a great example of poor game design having to do with a very crappy AI system. And then people say that the AI should suffer just as much as you do. Well, if the AI suffers just as much as you do, such design choices like that will make their way into games, and it will compromise the overall integrity of the game design. Why people want that is just baffling to me. I just wish these people would actually think very clearly, or actually go through the same experiences that I do when it comes to my games, before actually making such statements like that. Like, you have to understand games at the same level as I do, where you just explore these games on a technological level, you keep in touch with games, you keep in touch with everything that's happening in a game, so that you're able to make such objective statements. That's why I can feel like my statements have a lot of objectivity, because I actually analyze my games a lot. And with that, I've just developed a better understanding of my games. And this section right here, Finn is having to plant the explosives, but you can just sit behind here and just do nothing. Your AI is going to really help out, because Pierce is pretty good with that anti-material rifle and getting rid of the enemies. And watch out for any grenades. There are times where there could be grenades right near you, so you have to make sure you're nowhere near them. I think at times the grenades hitbox can phase through certain pieces of geometry, but I don't really know if that's the case with most of the geometry on this game. But that right there is a great example of a section that I feel is better designed when you're not going out of your way to put yourself in a situation where you're going to get screwed so much by bad designs with the Juavo. And that's just the thing you're going to be doing for the most part in Chapter 2. Like, Chapter 2, you're going to be playing the waiting game a lot, just waiting for your AI companions to actually do stuff, so that you're not compromising the overall integrity of the game too much when it comes to game design. But now we have this sequence coming up, which Piers is really good in this part. This is one of the few moments where Piers is actually very helpful as an AI companion, because his anti-material rifle is very damaging against the enemies, and he's very active when it comes to killing these guys, because he's in a scripted moment. Whenever the AI is forced to do these kind of actions that demand very heavily from them, they're very efficient in doing them. Although, I mean, the sequence in Chapter 1, where Piers was so bad at protecting me when I was on that hanging sequence, that is just different. I don't know why he behaves so differently in this part compared to Chapter 1, because Chapter 1 I would almost consider to be a scripted sequence, with the way it just presents itself. I mean, Chris is even telling Piers that he needs help, yet Piers is just so incompetent when actually dealing with the enemies. Yet here, it's different. But I think one of the main reasons is that you yourself have a lot more control. Like, it's almost like they designed that hanging sequence in Chapter 1 with the mentalities associated with you actually having control over what your character does. And that's why this sequence works, but that sequence in Chapter 1 doesn't work, because of the fact that Chris is so limited in what he's able to do. Now, I'm just going to be waiting right here. A couple of these enemies will be rushing towards me, and this is really cool right here. So for this enemy, you can instantly kill this enemy with the knife if you counter their long-range attack. It works with their close-range attack as well. You've got to hit the fleshy part of their tentacle in order to instantly kill them. That right there is Resident Evil Design 101, being rewarded for thinking outside the box when it comes to punishing attacks like that. It's such a shame that it only works with a knife, though. You cannot do that same technique of instantly killing those enemies with the stun rod or with Jake's melee, because they're not as damaging compared to the knife. That's the main downside with that technique, and that's the main downside with that enemy overall. But here comes this enemy, and he has a mutation we've never seen before. So, this guy here has mutated legs, so his legs are shielded, so he's not going to be as susceptible to stuns whenever you're trying to shoot him in the leg. It also applies to his body as well. His body can also receive armor plating, and it makes stunning them a lot harder to do, so you're going to have to be very reliant upon headshots if you're wanting to get rid of those enemies. Also, I believe whenever the enemies have that armor plating around their entire body, they will not go into the flinch animation that allows them to be susceptible to a coup de grace. So even if you do the elbow against them, they will not be able to go into that flinch animation. But just shoot them in the head and you'll be fine. But Pierce has destroyed the tank. There are still a couple of stragglers. Before you progress onward, you need to shoot that sniper that I just killed. That sniper, he is so bullcrap. And as long as you had long range and you are not in a range where he's able to shoot you, you'll be able to hit him at a distance and he won't be able to fight back. It's just you'll have to constantly lower your aim and then pull it back up, because that's just how the dot works, with the fact that the dot has to constantly sway within the reticle unless you drop your aim and reset it. It's really stupid that they would design the reticle like that. I don't understand the thought processes involved with making a reticle-based system like that, but it's just completely unnecessary, and it just leads to you not trusting your reticle as much, and it just leads you to do all these unnecessary actions to accommodate for faults on the developer's part. It's about as stupid as aiming the sniper rifles in Resident Evil 6. Resident Evil 6 is one of the worst sniper rifles I've ever used. I mean, it's not as bad as Operation Raccoon City's, though, because Operation Raccoon City sniper rifles are horrible. They are not damaging. It takes about 3 shots from a sniper rifle to kill a basic human. Why? Why does Operation Raccoon City favor such an underpowered design for a sniper rifle? It's a freaking sniper rifle. Have these developers never used a sniper rifle before? What exactly were they thinking when they were designing the sniper rifles in Operation Raccoon City? Like, at least the sniper rifles in Operation Raccoon City were pretty accurate. They didn't sway as much as they do in this game. On this game, it's like the characters have Parkinson's whenever you're aiming a sniper rifle. The scope sways so much. It's the most unrealistic sway I've ever seen in any game for a sniper rifle, and you can't even mitigate it by going prone. So you'll have to deal with that every single time you're trying to snipe enemies at a distance, and going for headshots is made way harder because of this really stupid design choice. I just don't see what it adds to the game. It just takes away from the skill in actually using the sniper rifle. Like in Resident Evil 4 and Resident Evil 5, the scope doesn't sway that much at all. The scope sway actually feels realistic, and sniping enemies on that game actually takes skill. If you missed, then it's your fault. Unless there are other factors, like for instance in Resident Evil 5, in the last chapter, there were a lot of explosions happening, so sniping the enemies was made very difficult because the explosions affected your sway so much. But aside from that, sniping in those games actually felt right, but this game, the sniping on this game is just horrible. And it's probably all there just to make it comparable with the fact that the reticle also sways so much whenever you're using other weapons. They probably thought it'd be weird to have the sniper rifle be the only weapon to not sway as frequently as the dot does whenever you're using the reticle-based system. That's the only thing I can think of as to why the scope sway on the sniper rifle is as ridiculous as it is. But let's not dwell on it. Right now, we're in the middle of a combat encounter, and what I'm going to do for this simple combat encounter is I'm going to shoot the guys that are parachuting in, and I'm just going to hang back. And if any enemies decide to come to me, I'm going to deal with them. I will say though, the detection on the parachutes is very bad. I think what's happening is the assault rifle has greater range compared to your pistol, which is why you're seeing moments right now where I'm nailing my detection properly so that I can destroy these parachutes. But when I swap to the pistol, I'm not destroying these parachutes at all. It's very weird with the detection on the pistol. But see right there, 2 shots with the assault rifle. If I was to shoot that parachute with my pistol, it would take more. I assumed originally that I had to only shoot the parachutes at a particular height, because maybe they had to get below the sky barrier, that way the shots would actually register, but I don't think that's the case. I think each individual weapon has varying ranges, so the assault rifle has more range than the pistol, which is why I'm able to destroy these parachutes. That's the first wave of parachutes destroyed. Now I just have the second wave. Watch out for that rocket launcher guy. I just go prone in order to shoot these guys. Another reason why I go prone is because whenever you're prone and you're looking up, you are actually able to look up a lot more than usual. I don't know why this game has the whole system where you can't look all the way up. You can only look at like 45 degrees upward. You can't just go all the way up. It just seems very silly to me that it would be designed like that, because there are some moments where you have to hit enemies that are directly above you, and there's even a sequence in Jake and Sherry's campaign where you have the option of shooting this chopper that Chris and Piers are dealing with, but it can be directly above you and you need to actually go prone in order to actually aim all the way upward. Although, for that sequence, you don't even want to shoot the chopper with the grenade launcher, because Fascinator told me that the sequence ends when you kill all the enemies, and he is correct in saying that. So, I unfortunately ended up wasting my grenade launcher rounds on the chopper, and it just didn't go down, and then I killed all the enemies and the section ended. So, don't make my mistake in Jake and Sherry's campaign. Just shoot all the enemies and kill them. Do not try to shoot the chopper. But that is the end of that simple sequence. And now we have this overly long and dragged out scenario right here, where we have to destroy all 3 of these turrets while there's an Augerman and a bunch of Juavo around. And on Jake and Sherry's campaign, this section is a lot of fun because you can just stand back over here and just let Chris and Piers do all the work. You don't have to go out of your way of just killing all these unnecessary enemies. You don't have to run the risk of just getting screwed by poor design choices as Jake and Sherry. You're just able to stand in a safe spot in a very good power position in order to deal with the enemies. But unfortunately, as Chris and Piers, you have to escort Finn to these locations. Like, Finn can't just go by himself. He doesn't have other BSAA soldiers supporting him. So, unfortunately, you're going to have to remain with Finn most of the time in order to ensure that he's doing his job correctly and that the Juavos aren't overwhelming him. And it just turns this section into a slogfest when you're playing as Chris and Piers. And I practically have to do the equivalent to what Kill All Run players do, where they just have to get rid of so many enemies to ensure that there aren't going to be any problems whatsoever, and that is just going to make the section drag out even more. And especially given that the way the game spawns in the enemies, it couldn't be more cheap, could it? Because depending on which point you're at when you're doing this sequence, you will cause scripted spawns. And there are scripted spawns involving snipers and a bunch of guys who get on the other turret that is nowhere near me. And they are really annoying. I mean, the turret guys aren't so much of a problem, but the snipers, they're an absolute pain. And you have to kill so many of these snipers to ensure that you are not going to get screwed by them, because the snipers are so bullcrap, and you'll not understand how broken the snipers are, because I do this whole entire section on the first try. And I'm taking the time to get rid of this Augerman. I didn't fully explain the Augerman, so these big guys, they are vulnerable when you shoot their back or when you shoot their mouth. The mouth is not a very good spot to shoot because the detection on the mouth weak spot is very bad. However, for the second Augerman, you have to shoot the mouth because its back isn't exposed, and you have to expose its back by shooting its mouth and then getting on top of it. And right now, I'm just taking the time to shoot the back weak spot because this is the weak spot that takes less shots to actually down the Augerman. And whenever the Augerman is down and he's near one of these ledges, I'm going to get right on top of him. I'm going to do the quick time event sequence, which is very easy to do with one single thumb, but I use both of my thumbs just to make the sequence go by faster. And I have to repeat this process at least 5 or 6 times before this Augerman actually dies. And I just don't agree with that whatsoever. I think it should take like 2 or 3 of these quick time events to actually take out this guy. Why does it have to be so many quick time events? It just makes the mechanic feel like it doesn't have any value, and it just feels like this is just the normal way you're supposed to deal with this guy. Like, if this was truly a special way of killing this guy, he would actually take less quick time events to actually go down. So I don't agree with that, and it just makes the Augerman encounters drag on for a very long time. And fun fact, the first turret that you need to destroy, you can actually get the Augerman to destroy it. And that's cool that is the case, but unfortunately the Augerman's AI is so stupid that even if you stand directly in front of this turret, it'll never do the attack. It'll spend more time just going on the left of the building, and if it's on the left of the building, it's never going to hit the turret. It has to be directly in front of the turret before it actually decides to do the attack, and it has to be the slam attack. It can't just be the punch attack, can it? It has to actually be the slam attack, and there's no guarantee that the Augerman is going to do the slam. I don't know how to consistently get the Augerman to destroy this turret, but if this could actually work consistently, then this would actually be a really good way of speeding up this section, but there's no way to control it. It's stupid. It's really dumb that it works this way. But I've taken the time to get rid of those enemies back over at that other spawn point, so that they're not going to ambush me too much, and I also took the time to take out the enemy that was right near the turret so that he doesn't get on the turret. I don't get on the turret that's near me in order to kill that guy, because the moment you get on the turret, he gets on the turret, and he's able to fire his turret endlessly. This is another broken design I don't appreciate with the enemies. Whenever they're utilizing turrets, or whenever you have the chopper in Chris's campaign utilizing the machine gun, they have the ability to fire the turrets endlessly. They have no kind of cooldown, yet you do. It is a cheap artificial handicap, and it's so unfair. Why the heck should they be given an advantage that you don't have? It's very broken, it's very unfair, and it's just not something I'm expecting from Resident Evil when it comes to designs like that. Like, if they're able to put in a cooldown feature for the enemies whenever they're using turrets in Resident Evil 5, why would they not apply that same exact mechanic with the turret guys on this game? Like I said, it just feels like Chris's campaign was very rushed, and the sequences involving the Juavos just feel like they weren't properly programmed compared to the sequences with the zombies in Leon's campaign. I definitely feel like Leon's campaign received a better treatment than Chris's campaign. But I'm standing in this spot right here to ambush the enemies at this spawn point, and also to force the enemies at the other spawn point to rush me rather than shoot me. That just seems to be a behavior I'm able to control whenever I'm just standing in that corner. The enemies don't try to shoot me as much whenever they come from this spawn point. They always try to get near me and melee me, and if they do decide to do that, I'm either going to counter them, or I'm just going to knife them and just get rid of them easily. But, you have to kill a couple of these enemies. There are a lot of enemies coming from these spawn points. Although, the spawn point that was right near the turret, it has a lot more enemies than these spawn points over here. And the good news is once you've fully destroyed this turret, the enemies will never spawn from this location. So, when you're playing as Jake and Sherry, and you have successfully destroyed the second turret, you're able to just fall back to this spot over here and have an easier time that way and not have to deal with so many enemies. I mean, if you're trying to go for the S rank though, it's a different story though, because you have to get rid of a certain number of enemies before it actually gives you the S rank. Although you're going to be killing a lot of enemies anyway before this whole entire sequence in Jake and Sherry's campaign, so that really isn't so much of an issue. But now that turret is destroyed, we need to escort Finn inside of this building, and there are two LMG guys that are going to ambush you the moment Finn opens this door. So you need to use the third-person cover trick to your advantage, and get rid of this guy right here, and then there's a guy who's taking cover on the left side. So I'm just going to stun him and just take him out. This guy here is being sneaky, he's trying to ambush me, but at least my AI partners were able to stop him. And that's good that I at least have 3 AI companions supporting me, because then the chances of them actually being passive are less likely, because at least one of these AI companions will actually be helping out. But don't let that go to your head too much. The AI is still not going to be as helpful as you'd like, because they will still miss the most obvious targets. Now that we're inside, I need to get Finn to go up onto the roof so that he will start planting the explosives. Rather than follow Finn, I'm going to take the time to eliminate any enemies that will spawn near the turret to my left. And there's at least 4 enemies that spawn on that turret. Although, for some unknown reason on this recording, they don't spawn in. So I get a free pass and not having to deal with the enemies that spawn on the other turret. I personally wish I didn't get it, because I don't like it when I get such lucky moments like that in my walkthroughs, because I want to help out every single person who consistently gets the worst possible scenario. And right now, that guy on the turret, he's being a nuisance, so I'm having to use the third-person cover trick in order to deal with him. Ooh, that right there. You see the blood effect just then? I don't know why, but for some reason on this game, whenever you're near an AI companion and they take damage, their blood can obscure your screen. So it gives the illusion that you yourself have taken damage when you actually haven't. And I don't know why it does this, but I personally wish it didn't exist, because then it just leads to confusion. But right now I'm just going to take the time to go up here, analyze the situation, see if there's any enemies crawling about, but there aren't until they decide to spawn in right behind me. I'm checking this location right now to see if there's any enemies, but they're not there. So after a short time just killing these enemies, I'm eventually going to go back inside of that building where Finn is, get up onto the roof, and help Finn out. I don't think you need to actually deal with the 4 enemies that spawn on that other turret, because I did find a strategy for this turret where I just sit on the roof and I sit behind a piece of cover, and then my AI companions help me out in getting the enemies off of me and keeping the enemies off of Finn. So that can be very effective, and I don't think the guys on the other turret can hit you whenever you're in the cover spot that I'm going to show in a moment. But I'm still remaining in this area right here, and I'm still just killing off all the enemies, because I'm just very paranoid that I might get ambushed by these enemies, and this takes a while. I'll sped it up to roughly like 12 seconds, and now I actually gain the confidence necessary to go inside this building, and I'm going to take on the enemies. And if this strategy actually works consistently, then there's really no need for me to even worry about the 4 enemies. and I don't have to worry about any other enemies ambushing me. So going to that spawn point and just killing off the enemies might be unnecessary, especially given that after I destroy the second turret, I'm going to be remaining underground for the remainder of the section while Finn actually deals with the third turret. Of course, that's after I successfully escort Finn to the turret. Once I successfully escort him to the turret, I'm able to just wait in an area and deal with any enemies that happen to come my way, because the enemies never attack Finn when he's on the third turret. Oh, also right here, I know the enemies are going to try to shoot me the moment I climb this ladder, so I'm trying to command my AI partner to go up, but he's resisting my commands. Once again, if the command system actually worked like Resident Evil 5's command system, then the AI would actually be a lot more reliable, but they're not reliable in this game whatsoever, so instead I'm going to have to use a flash grenade to stun them, and when I'm in this animation of the coup de grace, I'm going to use the quick shot to stop any enemies trying to punish me for going into the animation, and that works. But what I'm doing right now is completely unnecessary. This right here is completely unnecessary as well. I just need to turn around and get into the cover that is directly behind me. And see, I see right there. And this is when I start to hide. So this spot, I think, is a safe spot. I don't think the enemies at that other turret can shoot me while I'm over here. And maybe for additional safety, instead of taking cover, I can just lie down on the ground. And I'm going to occasionally pop out of cover to deal with the enemies, just so I can contribute to my rank. That's the only reason I'm ever going to do this. I mean, my AI is doing a very good job right now at distracting the enemies, so they're not pushing up. But of course, they're getting stun locked in the process, because that's just how the guns work with the enemies on this game. But given that I'm in a place of safety, and I'm in absolutely no danger right now, I'm just going to speed up the video right here so that Finn successfully plants his explosives, and that will be the end of this second turret. And the Augerman is going to spawn in, and as I said before, you need to expose the back weak spot with this second Augerman. You can either choose to deal with the Augerman yourself, or if you successfully help Finn destroy the third turret, after the turret is destroyed, the planes will be able to kill the Augerman, and you'll be able to save up on ammo, and that will cue the end of this sequence. But that is not for a while, because with Chris's campaign, you have got to be so patient. You have got to eliminate any possible threat if you want to stand any chance, or if you're wanting to save up on healing items, or if you're trying to satisfy the restrictions I'm trying to go for in this walkthrough. So Finn opens the door, and there are a couple of enemies that you're able to deal with. These guys right here, they're inactive, so you're able to get behind them and use a neck breaker. This is not going to be the case with every single enemy, because there are times where the enemies will just resume their normal status. It's very random how it turns out. But when you're down here, the Augerman can attack you through the holes, so you gotta pay attention to the marker on your screen to indicate where he is. And I'm just gonna proceed onward. I mean, he's still in the animation of getting off that building, and by the time I get to the end of this underground sequence, he will not have enough time to attack me. Oh, and this right here, this was tense. Watch this. I could have been down just then, but I somehow managed to avoid those bullets, and if that LMG guy had decided to do his perfect aiming nonsense, I was done for, and I had to restart the day checkpoint. But thank God that didn't happen. But I'm just going to proceed with a bit of caution. I'm going to use the grenades right here. And see that just then? Why the heck would they make the cover system button the same button for aiming? The amount of times I am trying to aim around the corner and then my character just takes cover is very, very frustrating. It happens too frequently on this game. What were they thinking when they designed it? Did no one in QA say that this was a problem? I mean, a lot of the critics were saying that the cover system on this game was really bad, yet there is no way to remap the cover button to a different button. I would much rather just have the system where you hold L2 and press X to go into cover, like how you can do so with low pieces of cover. But why do they make it where it's only the aiming button that matters when it comes to getting behind high pieces of cover? It's so stupid, and you'll end up taking damage. You'll give the enemies a free pass and allowing them to hit you. It's just so unfair. And it makes doing the third-person cover trick a lot harder to do, so you have to really make sure you aren't very close to these walls, because if you're close to the walls, you'll go into cover, and you will just have to deal with additional downtime with getting off the cover, and then readjusting yourself, and then just shooting the enemies. It's just tedious. There's no real reason you can give to me as to why this cover system is acceptable. If it was anything like Resident Evil 5's cover system, this would be a lot more acceptable. Because in Resident Evil 5, you press square behind certain pieces of cover, and they just go into the cover. Why they didn't settle on using the exact same system is something I will never understand, and it just completely impacts the flow of gameplay. But I've triggered the checkpoint, and this is important right here. The moment you trigger this checkpoint, you need to get over to this spot right here, because there's going to be 4 snipers that will spawn. You're going to be right, guys. 4 snipers. And I already know how bullcrap these snipers can be. I am not going to have them as a wild card right now, so I'm just going to stand over here and deal with them. And look at that. That looks like perfectly normal behavior for a sniper. He's taking a couple of seconds to stare you down in his scope before he actually fires. But believe me, guys, there are moments where he will just quick shot you with that sniper rifle, and there are times where the laser will show up for a split second, and then there are times where you won't even see the laser and then he'll fire. And given that the snipers are the only threat, and I'm in a really good position where I won't get ambushed by any enemies, I'm gonna have to speed up the video again. Yeah, guys, the fact that I'm having to put in this many moments where I'm just speeding up moments of downtime of me just not doing anything just perfectly shows just how overly long this sequence is and just how improperly paced this sequence is. And this is the case you're going to be getting with a lot of the sections in Chris's campaign. I'm sure you can understand right now why I don't like kill all runs, because I'm forced to just do a lot of this boring stuff over and over again just to get a bunch of unnecessary enemies out of the way. Although in this case, every single enemy is very necessary, because they will just screw you over in some really stupid ways. So I kind of had to adopt the mindset for a kill-all run if I wanted to stand any chance of getting this restriction done properly, or with actually making it seem like that Resident Evil 6 is properly designed, when in actuality it is filled with so many problems that are just heavily apparent in Chris's campaign. So I've dealt with those snipers. Now I'm just going to take the time to expose the weak spot on this Augerman, and I'm going to try to use the turret right here, but the Augerman has the ability to throw a truck over here, and he's doing it right now, so I should be running right now. So he's gonna throw it right there. I need to move, and he misses me. He actually has the ability to hit you through that truck. The truck doesn't actually have a hitbox on it. I mean, you clip on it, but he's able to hit you through the truck. And right there, he has the ability to destroy turrets. So you have to get off the turrets if you want to ensure he's not going to destroy the turrets. And right now, he's coming my way, so I'm going to use the third-person cover trick on him. There are going to be enemies spawning behind me. And right there, for some reason, he's doing the wrong flinch animation. He only does that animation if you're not hitting his weak spots. But I was hitting his weak spot just then, yet he still did that animation. And I don't understand the whole point of that animation. You can hear gas coming out of him. Is there some significance to the gas coming out of him? Is there some kind of damage that he's able to do with that gas? I mean, I don't understand why that animation is there. It's just very confusing. I'm not a big fan of animations like that in games where they try to convey something important, but in actuality, they're not that important to begin with. And that right there is another sniper, so I need to take care of him. And I need to get rid of these enemies over here. Or I'm sorry, I don't think that was a sniper. I think that was just a guy on a turret, but he wasn't getting on the turret for some reason. But the enemies are still spawning in, and my AI is doing a good job at distracting them. So this is buying me time to stun this guy. But look at his AI. His AI is so stupid. He keeps turning all over the place. And then I finally stun him, and now I'm able to expose his weak spot. And the quick time event for this is different. You need to rotate the analog sticks. Whenever you have this particular quick time event, instead of using only one analog stick, use both of your analog sticks. I know it's confusing at times, and I know a lot of people weren't expecting that, but it should have been communicated better that you're able to use both of your analog sticks to do those quick time events, and it allows you to do them incredibly fast. So now that the weak spot is exposed, I'm eventually going to put myself near Finn and force him to go forward, and then the moment Finn drops down to get onto the turret, I'm just going to run back to my safe spot, which is the spot that I use to deal with the snipers. I'm going to wait for the Augerman to attack before I actually run past him, so that I don't get cheap shot by him. And now I'm just going to make my way to Finn. Make sure you're hugging the left-hand side, because there are enemies that can shoot you where Finn is. So I wasn't close enough just then. I need to go back, and I'm just checking to make sure that guy is dead, which he is. And now I'm just going to make my way back to the safe spot. And when I get over to my safe spot, I'm going to put in another moment where I'm going to speed up the video. Because what would I be talking about? Well, absolutely nothing, because all I'm doing is just standing around, waiting for Finn to do his thing, and waiting for the Augerman to be killed by the planes. And it takes up so much time that I have to speed up the video, because that's just how dragged out this whole entire scenario is. And my god, I don't even know if I'll have the stomach necessary to go through this section again if I decide to replay Chris's campaign for some reason. At least this strategy that I've laid out for this whole entire section is very beneficial. in understanding how to properly approach the section and how to avoid all the cheap moments. Oh, except for this one right here. When the turret gets destroyed, a bunch of enemies are going to spawn in, and I nearly get screwed by the cutscene that plays when the Augerman is getting killed by the plane. So you'll notice the enemies are around here, and the cutscene's playing right now, so the enemies are moving during this cutscene, and there's going to be a guy to my left, and look at this, look at this. How did I not get fully down at that point? I just managed to scrape by with a little bit of health left on my first life cube. And now I'm just having to run for my life. I panicked during that moment. I literally screamed. That was hilarious, but also stupid if I had to restart that whole entire section again just to get back to that sequence. Although, I think you get a checkpoint after you do the third turret, so it really doesn't matter. But now we're moving on to classic Resident Evil design, where the pacing of the encounters actually feels right, and the enemies aren't overly used. Rather than just being placed all over the place, the enemies are actually used intelligently. And right here, we're about to encounter a new enemy type, which are the Napods. Only you're able to do something really cool. This is Resident Evil Design 101 right here. You have to have enough ammo to do this, but if you stay up here and you focus on the two cocoons, you can get rid of these cocoons, and then you're able to start the fight, and you only have to deal with one Napod, because if you go into this fight normally, these Napod take a tremendous amount of punishment before they actually go down, and it just drags the scenario out, and I don't appreciate this encounter whatsoever, which is why I'm resorting to this, which I assume they've given the Napod this much life to force you to destroy these cocoons. I mean, a lot of people would assume that these cocoons can't be destroyed because of the amount of punishment they take, and Sherry is the only one who's able to destroy these cocoons very quickly because they're weak to electricity, and Sherry just so happens to have a stun rod that emits electricity, which is why they're able to be destroyed so quickly, but you need to have a lot of ammo to destroy these cocoons. And I just don't like the Napod as an enemy type. I think they're just very simplistically designed. They don't feel like a Resident Evil anime, and how they work is you have to break their armor that's on their back in order to expose their weak spot, and then lay everything you have into that weak spot, and that's it. That's about as basic as you can get for an enemy type. And they're pretty dumb, and their attacks are pretty predictable, although if they decide to do the charge attack off screen, it's very fast, and you can get caught very easily by that charge attack. And also, with this boss variant in the Napod, you cannot counter their charge attack. You can only counter the charge attack from the normal Napod because they're smaller than these guys. Not that there's any benefit to countering the charge attack, because all you'll do is just shatter their frontal shell, but it doesn't add that much benefit. I mean, I don't know how much of a damage increase you get from just hitting the front side of the Napod, but it just doesn't feel like much. It feels like it's the same amount of damage as what I'm doing right now to these armor platings. It's just completely unnecessary. There's no incentive to go for that counter. It's definitely another reason why I don't like this anime. But it finally goes down, and I am so glad I don't have to deal with the rest of these Napod, because I'm sure I would have probably gone through most of my ammo by now. But Fascinator did mention that when you're destroying the cocoons, it affects your accuracy because the game doesn't properly understand that you're aiming for something that is potentially classed as an enemy. And the game instead classes the cocoons as just solid objects. But that's just really stupid. How could they miss something as simple as that? But I shouldn't even be complaining because, once again, rank doesn't mean anything. And I can already restore my accuracy by just repeatedly shooting into an enemy. And we're coming across a bunch of Chihuahua right now. And I'm just going to run past these guys and get behind them. And then take them out one by one. And I'm going to use my assault rifle to deal with them. And that guy right there, I'm very lucky he didn't do the perfect aiming nonsense. He just decided to do his spraying attack. And his spraying attack, he generally does it at chest height, so you can kind of slide under it. But you have to make sure you get behind him so that he doesn't immediately adjust his sights downward in order to hit you while you're on the ground. And yeah, see? This is the only time you're encountering Gun Chihuahua in this section. And this is exactly how the encounters should feel like. I mean, I don't like having to do all these moments where you're just killing enemy after enemy after enemy after enemy and all those dragged out scenarios like what I just did previously with Jake and Sherry. It just makes the gameplay so repetitive, and it just completely undermines how incredible Resident Evil 6's combat systems are. When they're being used so much, it just turns Resident Evil 6's combat systems into something that's just trite and overused. In Resident Evil 4 and in Resident Evil 5, none of the combat encounters felt like they dragged out, so you really showed a lot of respect for the combat systems of those games, but I just feel like this game kind of mocks that with the way to just put you into these dragged out scenarios. And I just don't appreciate that whatsoever, but we're dealing with a new enemy type, which are the Stray Lots, and this is a Resident Evil anime. if you slide into this enemy or you do a hard stun on them, they will always get stunned, and then you can do this quick time event sequence, and you can stun lock them by sliding into them the moment they decide to stand up. It takes 2 of these quick time event sequences to kill these enemies. The order for these quick time event sequences is always R2, X, and then the third prompt is either R2 or square. So that's why I'm a little bit delayed when it comes to hitting the third button. Although I think it's in the pattern, because I think if you get R2 for your first quick time event sequence and you repeat it, it's always going to be square. So I don't think it's as random as I think. But the Strelats are a pretty dangerous enemy if you let them be a dangerous enemy. So this range attack that they're doing right now, you can easily avoid it by just sliding. And then they also have the ability to emit smoke, which doesn't damage you, but it allows them to get a bit of a breather to get away. And then their most dangerous attack is an acid attack that they do at close range. And the hitbox on the acid is not very good. It has a bit of phantom range to it. And not only that, but the fumes that are emitted by the acid can actually stun you. So that is something you're going to have to bear in mind when it comes to dealing with the Strelats. I had a hilarious moment in Jake's campaign where this Strelat was doing the animation of starting up his range attack, but as I was sliding into him, he actually seamlessly transitioned into an acid attack. So I think the Strelats have the ability to feign a range attack in order to actually trick you into getting hit by the acid attack. Either that, or maybe his AI glitched out, or he probably just was able to seamlessly transition into the animation because he canceled his recovery frames. But if that is a design, that is really cool. I mean, it's not very cool if it actually causes damage, or downs you, or kills you, and then you're forced to restart the whole entire encounter again. But I think it's a very interesting counter system that the Strelats have, assuming that it is intentional, of course. But it's very rare that it happens, so you're not going to get it every single time, though. But I'm just going to run past the rest of these enemies because there's no point in dealing with them. And once I get to this door, this will conclude Chapter 2. So stay tuned for the future chapters. Thank you all for watching, and you take care now.
Roger.